Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Green. This is Trifecta. Now, in June, we'll have wrapped up 5 years of recovery, but it's been a recovery unlike any in American history, with low growth and persistently high unemployment. It's been so bad for so long that some are calling it the new normal. But I've noticed that the lousy economy isn't the only new normal that we're enjoying, for lack of a better word. There's also a new normal in the day-to-day functioning of the American political machine, and maybe even a new normal in what it means to be an American. And these are the topics we're talking about this week on my special three-part trifecta on America's new normals. So let's bring on Bill Whittle and Scott Ott and get this segment going. Gents, this whole thing got started over the weekend. I should have been building the Lego R2-D2 with my boys, but instead I was looking at the new employment survey from Gallup because, well, apparently I'm an idiot like that. Now, I'll preface this by saying that the official unemployment rate is 6.6%, which is okay for the first year of a recovery, but we are in year 5. Gallup pegs the real unemployment rate today at 9%, and the underemployment rate, that's the rate that includes people who want full-time work but can only find part-time work, that rate is at 18.9%. It's the highest it's been in 3 years or more now. Bill, growth is okay. The economy is growing. Not great, but okay. So why can't we generate any jobs?
Well, when you measure the growth of an economy, you're basically talking about the number of, basically the amount of GDP, but that doesn't necessarily translate to either wages or employment. Increased productivity means that you can have an increase in GDP growth, but not hire any new people. Matter of fact, it's the amazing increase in productivity, especially American workers' productivity, that's been able to keep us in the game at all. Growth is an interesting metric, but unemployment is a much better metric for the mood of the country. In other words, if the economy is booming and you're not part of it, it doesn't particularly help your attitude about prosperity or any of this stuff. So I think the real issue we have to ask ourselves with the new normal, Steve, is what do we measure relative success against? I'm deeply concerned that just to really emphasize this and put it in black and white terms, just to crank up the contrast, if you are used to living in your parents' basement until you're 40 years old and then you suddenly get a job that's making $45,000 a year, which in a better economy without all these government controls, you would have started that in your 20s, then you could be grateful that you're finally out of the house in your 40s, but that's not what things used to be. And this is the problem with slow incremental change. I did an afterburner on boiling frogs, right? As long as the change is very slow and incremental, no one has that visceral reaction to, well, you know, things used to be different and now they're a lot worse. People who voted for Obama in 2008 really, and on some levels, you know, didn't enter the job market until after he's president. They've got nothing to compare him to.
Oh, geez. You know what, folks, if you missed that afterburner, it came out last week. I watched it as soon as it came out. You owe it to yourself to click on that. All right, Scott, two other parts of the new normal caught my eye. The first is that the CBO projects that Obamacare will reduce working hours in America between now and just 2017, reduce working hours by the equivalent of 2 million to 2.5 million full-time jobs. Now, the second item is that last year a record 3,000 Americans renounced their citizenship, most to avoid Washington's double taxation of their overseas earnings. So my question is, with Americans working and earning less, and with thousands of our best earners renouncing their citizenship, who's going to pay for all these new benefits?
Well, the folks that are watching this show right now, assuming they're watching it from the mainland or even Hawaii, you know, it's funny because that big fat book by Ayn Rand that I never have read and probably never will read because I'm afraid I'll die before I finish it, it seems to be coming true here. It seems to be playing out just as she has foreseen, as Mr. Whittle would say. You know, folks should be concerned about this because when you have those people who say, hey, this used to be the engine of prosperity and it no longer seems to be my best option and I'm going to go somewhere else, that's a bad sign. Now, the whole issue of the Obamacare costing 2.5 million jobs, that's an interesting phenomenon because it doesn't mean that 100 or 2.5 million people are going to be fired as a result of Obamacare. Essentially, the CBO is projecting that 2 to 2.5 million people will decide that since they can get a subsidized health insurance policy from the federal government, they no longer need to work that extra job or they no longer need to work full time. And so they're actually going to dial back their own employment. There's a story column, op-ed in the Wall Street Journal this week by Alan Blinder, who's a apropos last name, tells you everything you need to know about this Princeton economist, who basically ignores the entire fact of the fact that we are going to be subsidizing these folks who step out of the workforce in order to get that subsidized insurance. We have multiple factors right now that are all conspiring to say, hey, sell rather than buy.
Selling America, what a sad thing to do. Folks, this new normal isn't actually new at all. It's the old normal in Europe, where low growth and high unemployment, especially among the young, has been the norm for 40 years or longer now. And it didn't become the normal here until we adopted Europe's preferences for cradle-to-grave everything, and a regulatory apparatus which could be best described as Mecha Godzilla, is designed by Rube Goldberg. So here we are, about to enter our 6th year of so-called recovery, and 25 million Americans either can't find work or they can't find enough work, and their prospects are in decline, unexpectedly. I'll look for part 2 of my series later this week. For Scott Ott and Bill Whittle, I'm Steve Green.